Okay, so today we are going to have a discussion on tax home and training for tax homes if you are a traveler or trying to determine if you're eligible to be a traveler. And I have with me Kim Baxter and April Grace. Kim is a recruiter here at National Recruiting Consultants, and I'm DeLibra, a recruiter and CEO of National Recruiting Consultants. And April is our president of operations. So the two of them will be helping me out, asking some questions that we can answer in hopes to provide some information that may be useful going forward. So with that, we'll just start out. Please make it interactive, ladies. Ask questions throughout. And if something doesn't make sense, please ask for clarity so that we can have a useful tool. Okay, so what is a traveler? So when I am talking to educators about working with us, I early on try to determine if they are a traveler or a local employee. So the major difference is a traveler is someone who we ask to leave their home temporarily to come to work for us in another location. So the big things to remember to determine if you are a traveler is if you're a local person, you go back to your residence every night. You may have a long commute or you can have a short commute, but commuting is not a traveler. So if you go home to your place of residence at the end of each workday, you're local. If you are a traveler, you're someone that maintains what's called a tax home in another location, and you're not able to go home every day, and you're having to duplicate expenses, meaning you're having to take on the expense of a hotel or an apartment or renting out a room somewhere. Those are the types of things that would qualify you to be a traveler. And the other thing to remember is that you would have to work in a location for less than a year. So if you stay at one location for 12 months, the IRS deems that as your new tax home. So your tax home is not just your place of residence. It's also can be the place that you are employed. So in order to remain a traveler, you would not want to stay in the same location for more than a year. Now, what I've seen throughout my days in doing this is some travelers will change companies and stay at the same location or stay in the same metropolitan area and still try to receive tax-free money. So the big key is it's not about the same job, it's about the same location. So let's say, for instance, we're based out of Dallas. So I'll base everything on Dallas. Let's say I am a traveler and I'm working for a school district in Dallas. And I do an assignment from August to May, the school year. And then the school asks me to stay on over the summer to do some testing to help set up things for the next school year. And I just decide to stay on for the remainder of the school year. And I don't go home at all. And I stay for a full year. And then I take on another contract with that same school district in August for the next year. Well, I've in fact been there for 12 months. And now the way the IRS would deem it is that this is my home. So I would now be liable for all of my income being taxed because I've been in the same place for a year. So that's one thing. Those are the ways to kind of determine whether or not you are a traveler, as long as it's less than a year. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. So what is a tax home? A tax home, like I said, is where your place of residence is, where typically a normal working situation would be. You would have your employment near that location. But the industry that we're in and the shortage that we see with schools, we're able to ask for educators outside of the areas that we're staffing to come in and help out in those schools. So if we do that, we're asking someone to essentially leave their home where they have expenses and come to a new location and take on new expenses. So if you are duplicating expenses, you have a tax home. So what duplicating expenses means is something different for most everyone. So let's say it could be you have a mortgage. It could be that you pay rent. It could be that you pay fair market rent for a room in someone's home. It could be that you get together with a few educators and you all rent a house in one location. It's like your crash pad, so to speak, but you're paying bills somewhere else where you're not working. It doesn't have to be, there's not a set threshold that you have to pay, but it has to be fair market rent. So the what I have seen in the past is like a new grad telling their family, hey, I'm going to go be a traveler. And they just put their mom and dad's address down on their documentation as their travel home or their tax home, I'm sorry. And they go off and travel. The issue with that is if for some reason you were to be audited by the IRS, they would ask you to show proof that you're eligible for the tax-free money. And the way that you would show proof of that is to show that you have been paying expenses somewhere else. So if you just put down your mom and dad's address, or you just put down a friend's address, that's not really duplicating expenses. So what I would advise a new graduate to do is to really talk to your loved one or your parents. If you want to rent out your room in their home and they do designate that room just for you, what would the fair market rate be? So if your parents were to say, we're once they're empty nesters and you're out of their home and they were going to put their room on Airbnb, put the room on Airbnb or the basement of their house or something, what could they get for it? And that's what you would need to pay to your parents, and you would need to have documented, and you would need to keep proof of that. And it would need to be a situation like that in order for you to have duplicating expenses. The other way, of course, is you own a home, you rent an apartment, you rent a house, something of that nature. So you have to be, there's no rule about how much you have to pay in either place. You just have to be duplicating and paying in more than one place. What is a per diem? So these are tax-free reimbursements that the IRS allows or companies to pay employees without receipts. So we are required to stay within a certain threshold. And there is a site called gsa.gov that you can go and look and see what the thresholds are based on the area that you're working. So the per diems are going to be based on where we send you to work, not where you're from. And the per diem also may be called a stipend. It also may be called an allowance. So anything like that would have, those are regulated by the IRS, and we are not allowed to go over a certain amount. But as long as we stay underneath the IRS reimbursement amounts that are updated annually on the GSA, we are allowed to pay those amounts without receipts. So that's where the allowances and where you hear things like tax-free advantage and things like that come from. But the only way you're eligible for that, again, is if you're duplicating expenses.
Hey, DeLibra, a quick question.
Sure.
So whenever we talk about per diem reimbursements, I know the website goes over housing and meal. When it comes to gas mileage, is that part of that as well? Or can you give clarity on that portion of reimbursements that we offer?
So mileage, okay, so the IRS puts out a mileage rate every year. So there's two ways that we would use that. There are some assignments. This rarely happens in schools, though. It's more common in things like home health, where if you're driving on the clock, they will reimburse you at the IRS mileage rate, which is 56 cents this year a mile. So most schools, we just are allowed to pay you for your drive time, so your hourly rate. We internally have our process for determining travel allowances is so let's say if we sign you up for an assignment and you live in Chicago and we ask you to travel down into Houston to work at a school for us, we can assess a travel allowance to give you, but our internal process is to not go over the IRS mileage rate per mile. If we were to pay out any more than that, we would need receipts. But that is our internal process that we use so that if we're ever audited, we can explain to the IRS how we apply a travel allowance to each person. We won't go over the miles or the rate for mileage reimbursement. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. So how long can I stay on an assignment? I mentioned earlier that no more than 12 months for one assignment. And the reason why I bring this up again is because your intention matters. So let's say most schools, we start determining if you're going to return or not to that school district in the spring. So if you decide to stay on for the summer and then go ahead, so let's say in the spring, let's say it's April and the district says, hey, we really want you to stay on this summer and help. And you decide to do that. And so you have a contract that allows you to stay for the rest of the school year. And then you also are deciding that you want to return the following year. The minute that you sign a contract that shows that your intentions is to stay at that district more than 12 months, that exact moment, everything moving forward is taxed. It's about the 12 months, but it's more about your intentions. The moment you know you're going to stay more than 12 months, everything becomes taxed moving forward. So we will help guide you through that. We will speak with you and make sure you're clear and understand any tax implications when making your decisions to stay on at a district or not, because the last thing we would want you to do is to agree to stay on and then think that you're going to be eligible for per diems moving forward in the next school year if you're not eligible. So we will do everything we can to make sure that you know exactly what you're signing up for. So how many times can I return to a location? Now, this is a sticky one, especially in schools, because there are a lot of districts that will want you more than 1 year, which is fine. The big thing, here's two things to remember is you can't stay more than 12 months and you can't go back more than twice. So if you're signing up and you're reaching your close to 12 months at a district, it's a good idea to go away for 3 months. This is why school contracts are so great, because you get the summers off. So you could go home for the summer or go do something else for the summer and then come back and reset the clock and do a second contract. But after you do 2 contracts in one location, again, the IRS will look at this and say, okay, obviously you live here. This is where you should be paying taxes. And then you would then become taxable. So I say the world is great. Go see some other districts. Don't keep returning over and over, to give yourself a little space so that you're not putting yourself in a position to be audited. Because if you're constantly your W-2 is showing the same location over and over, and your wages reflect that you must be getting per diems or some of some nature, then you're going to put yourself on like a little red flag list. So no more than 2 years. It's not really that scary. It just sounds a little scary. Just be mindful that you don't stay at a district more than 2 years and you're okay. The other thing to remember is you can't abandon your tax home. So let's say you work at the district for 9 months and then you decide, oh, I'll go take another job somewhere else for 3 months and then come back to the district, or even move on to a different district. You should always plan within your contracts to return home for at least 1 month out of the year. It doesn't have to be consecutive, but you should at least go home one a total of cumulative amount of time to equal 1 month out of each year. So the reason why this is important is because if you're going to say this is my tax home and where I really do live, you should be there some. And a great way to document that is through your contracts. So, and keeping up with the school calendars. If I were traveling for school districts, I would hold on to all my confirmation letters with any agencies I work with. I would keep a copy of all of those school calendars so that you can see the breaks and you can show like, this is when I went home. So even if you decide to go take on work somewhere for the summer, throughout the school year or partially over the summer, you need to go home. So you want to make sure that you don't abandon your tax home and you don't go to the same location more than twice.
Quick
So,
question, because I
go
know we've
ahead.
had some people do this. Let's say they went on a contract to Dallas for a year and they decided that they wanted to sell their taxable home in New York or Louisiana and move here. Are they still eligible? I mean, they're no longer eligible for the tax-free money, but are they still eligible to work for us locally for that school for more than 2 years?
Absolutely. Even if you, like I said on the one slide about your intention is now you know you're going to stay and you sign another contract, even though that contract doesn't start for months on and you're now taxable, you can still work with us. Like I said at the beginning is we have two buckets essentially, right? We have local employees and you have travelers. If you decide to sell your tax home and to relocate to wherever it is that you're traveling for us, then we'll just switch your pay package. We'll have to change your pay package to where all of your income becomes taxable. You no longer receive tax-free per diems, but you just receive a taxable wage like the majority of us, like everyone else. So, but yeah, if you then are a commuter, right? So if you're commuting home every night, then yes, we just switch you to a taxable pay package.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I get this one a lot. Is there a 50-mile rule? No, it's all about duplicating expenses. So 50-mile rule is something that a lot of, and I think it's not a great idea, but a lot of staffing companies have this internally in mind that as long as the person lives 50 miles away from where we're sending them, I can give them per diems. That's not the case. And if you were to end up audited, you would have to show proof that you've been duplicating expenses, and you wouldn't be able to do that if you live 50 miles away and you drive home every night. So I don't recommend this as a good practice. I recommend basing everything off of whether or not you're duplicating expenses, because if the IRS were to audit you and you don't have proof of your duplicating, they can look back at your wages for 6 years and determine a 25% penalty and apply that to all your wages. And then you owe this huge fine to the IRS for not paying in the proper amount of taxes. So make sure you're duplicating expenses. You're not going home every day and getting tax-free money for that. Also, so these are other things that I would do. You need to make sure that you're saving and really documenting your expenses, because if you are audited, they will look back. So you want to make sure that while you're a traveler, keeping really good clean files for at least 7 years, honestly. So the current year, and they can look 6 years back. So no 50-mile rule. It's all about duplication. And what's funny to me is 50 miles isn't that big of a deal depending on where you live. I look at it more like if your drive is more than an hour and a half, you're probably not wanting to do that every day. So you probably will be duplicating expenses, and you probably have a tax home that's far enough away. But if it's, to me, I think if the drive is feasible, which many people drive 50 miles back and forth to work a day, then if the drive is feasible, we can't pay you tax-free money. We'd have to assume that you're driving home every day. So, oh, I brought this up already, like saving your contracts. I think even saving copies of the school calendars to show when you're not at the location, and you're back home, saving proof of all of your expenses. And again, saving everything for about 7 years, not about, saving for 7 years, just in case the you are audited and they want to look back at it. I bring the auditing up, it's to scare you a little bit, but also, I mean, it has happened and you don't want to be caught off guard and realize that somewhere along the lines that you weren't compliant and now you either didn't save your proof or you don't really have proof and you end up paying an exorbitant amount in taxes when technically maybe you should, or you just didn't keep up with the proof to show that you shouldn't. Some resources out there that I found helpful are with NATHO, and we'll hang these links on our website so that you guys can look at them. But there's a tax document that's for travelers that will that goes over a lot of what I just discussed. And there's a travel tax is a company that prepares taxes for travelers. They also offer free consulting throughout the year. So if you ever need to speak to someone to make sure you're doing things properly. They have a blog, and this WordPress site is their blog. And the blog is pretty good because it has different categories and you can click on the category of things that you want to talk or read about and get specific information about whatever it is that you need. And then again, our website, we will be hanging this video and some other tools there, and also a place where you can find resources for anything that you need regarding tax homes. Okay. Any other questions? Uh-oh.
Yeah, I've gotten this question recently. When it comes to the per diem travel funds, so on and so forth, does that tax-free money, if I'm, of course, traveling to a location that we have as a contract, does that include airline or rental car?
No, but so there's a couple things you can do. So if someone needs an airline, I wouldn't necessarily give them the travel allowance because of the mileage rate, or because that's assuming that they're driving a car. So if they need to fly into the city, I would look at it differently and create them a package that would allow them to purchase the airline. So how much do they need for a ticket? And you can offer that and then just have them send in the airline receipt. And then how much will it cost them to rent a car? You can offer that and have them send in the receipt. So there, I mean, per diems are for meals and housing only. And so that you don't have to have receipts. Everything else is okay. You just have to have receipts. So like you, instead of building them a per diem package, or maybe they still have the per diem package for food and housing. But if you need to help them get here, instead of using the travel allowance for that, I would use that allotment to help pay for a plane ticket, and then figure out within the deal how much the district is paying us that you can put towards a rental car. Had that happen before, but I would not try to build it into meals and housing because those allowances are for those two things. Granted, no one's like going through asking for receipts of those two things, but there's a max on it to make sure that it's not being used for anything outside of that. And although the allowances are pretty high, but if you try to tack on housing and a rental car, and maybe it may not be enough, but maybe you just come up with how much we can pay a week for a rental car and have them send us receipts for it. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Yeah, that does.
Okay. So, okay. thank you guys for listening in on the travel chat. That actually didn't take very long. So also, this more than likely will get posted on social media too. And if there's any questions, we'll double check on the comment sections and answer any questions that get posted out there. So thank you so much.